So stupid. Look at you.
No, you can't.
Stupid. Pointless.
Cars coming. Jump now. Jump in front of the car. Go on. Do it. No, don't.
My name is Dasha, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this psychological disorder known as schizophrenia.
No, don't. Don't cross the road. You can't.
Schizophrenia is defined by the American Psychological Association as a serious mental illness characterized by incoherent or illogical thoughts, bizarre behavior and speech, and delusions or hallucinations, such as hearing voices. Schizophrenia typically begins in early adulthood.
Look at you. Stupid. Pointless.
My case study is called A Young Man Who Believes He Can Solve the Race Problem with Paint. The patient is a 24-year-old, single, unemployed college dropout who was given the pseudonym Donald. Donald was admitted to the hospital 3 weeks after he painted everything in sight black and white, including his room, his furniture, his clothes, and even himself. He did this in response to a persistent male voice that would tell him that his behavior would somehow solve the race problem in America and bring peace to his family. This wasn't the first time that Donald had been hospitalized either. He had been hospitalized on at least 5 different occasions in the past 5 years, each lasting 4 to 6 weeks. These hospitalizations were a result of a worsening of his symptoms, which included hallucinations, strange behaviors, and delusions. Other points mentioned in the case study included social withdrawal, poor personal hygiene, and a mother with similar symptoms.
Worthless.
Did you touch that?
Stupid.
Yes, you were. You touched that.
So stupid. Look at you.
I can see you sweating.
Stupid. Pointless.
There.
Worthless.
She knows. Yes, look at me.
Whenever I hear of hallucinations and delusions, I automatically think of schizophrenia. The DSM-4 helped confirm my suspicions of schizophrenia because Donald had all the right symptoms. He had had them for the proper length of time needed to diagnose schizophrenia. He had responded well to antipsychotic medication when he was given it and when he took it, which he was reluctant to do. And he didn't have any other health or drug problems that could explain the experiences that he had been having. The symptoms we now associate with schizophrenia were originally called dementia praecox by German physician Emil Kraepelin. It wasn't until 1911 when Swiss psychiatrist Eugen Bleuler coined the term schizophrenia. The term comes from Greek roots with schizo meaning split and phreni meaning mind. Therefore, schizophrenia means a fragmented mind or fragmented thinking. This does not, however, mean multiple personalities, which is sometimes mistaken for schizophrenia. Several criteria must be met before one is diagnosed with schizophrenia. The patient must exhibit one or more of the following: delusions, hallucinations, bizarre behavior, which does seem a bit arbitrary, but it's defined as behavior that is inappropriate or strange to others, disorganized speech, and negative symptoms, which basically are a lack of behavior or thought or feeling that should be there, but it isn't because of a mental illness. For example, the person may experience anhedonia, which is the lack of experiencing pleasure, or they might have apathy, which is a lack of motivation. Symptoms of schizophrenia must be present for at least 6 months before the illness is diagnosed, and within that 6 months there must be at least 1 whole month of symptoms being present, or active symptoms. It is also required that there be a significant worsening in social or occupational functioning for schizophrenia to be diagnosed. This can mean trouble in school, at work, or in relationships that makes a big impact on the patient's life. Other characteristics of the disorder include inappropriate affect, which means reacting in ways that don't correspond with appropriate stimulus. For example, smiling when nothing has made a person happy. This is most common in the disorganized schizophrenic subtype. Dysphoric mood, which is generally just a negative mood and can include depression, anxiety, anger, etc., is also characteristic. Many schizophrenics experience disturbed sleep patterns. They may sleep too little or too much and might not have a stable sleep schedule or pattern. They may also lose interest in stimulus such as food or social activities. This may be due to being suspicious of others' intentions. For example, they may not trust the safety of the food made by other people because they may think people are trying to poison them.
Corporate coffee futures and professional design future concept to have professional living and function, money to be independent and wealth generation for entertainment. I have no function for communication and investment. Coffee futures at 23% investment. I have to have Claudia Schiffer.
Abnormal psychomotor activity is often found in schizophrenics, especially within the catatonic subtype. Such activity may include pacing, rocking, immobility, or being stuck in unusual positions. Schizophrenics have a hard time realizing and accepting the fact that they are ill, and so it's not uncommon for them to refuse treatment if they don't think they need it. Depersonalization is often exhibited, which is basically a loss of personality and connectedness with oneself. Derealization is similar, in which a person loses touch with reality. This happens quite easily through hallucinations. Other somatic concerns may come up, which are physical symptoms. While the symptoms are physical in nature, they occur because of the psychological illness. This is kind of like hypochondria, in that the person wouldn't and shouldn't have the ailment if it weren't for the psychological problem.
Style corporate coffee futures in professional design future concept to have professional living and function, money to be independent.
The severity of this disorder makes a significant impact on the lives of those suffering from it. Schizophrenics generally have a shorter lifespan than the general population, and this is largely due to the prevalence of suicide and suicide attempts. 10% of schizophrenics end up committing suicide, and approximately 30% make at least one attempt. There are higher rates of violent and assaultive behavior among schizophrenics, but most are not more dangerous than the general population. Schizophrenia is often accompanied by other disorders, which is called comorbidity. Substance abuse is very common, with as many as 90% of schizophrenics being dependent on tobacco. They are generally very heavy tobacco users and prefer cigarettes with a high nicotine content. Anxiety, OCD, and panic disorders are also very common amongst the schizophrenic population.
I have no function for communication and investment. Coffee futures at 23% investment. I have to have Claudia Schiffer.
There are some warning signs that may appear before a person becomes schizophrenic. This pre-schizophrenic phase is called the prodromal period. It includes isolating oneself, having strange thoughts, and becoming suspicious. A family history of mental illness makes you more prone to schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is equally common amongst men and women in all ethnicities. Symptoms usually start between the ages of 16 and 30 and rarely present themselves in children or those over 45, though it does occasionally happen. Men tend to show symptoms earlier than women. While it's not certain exactly what causes schizophrenia, there seems to be a genetic link. While only 1% of the general population suffers from the disorder, it's more prevalent amongst those that have relatives with it. If you have an identical twin with schizophrenia, your chances of also being affected can be as much as 65%. Most scientists believe that a dysfunction in a gene or multiple genes dealing with brain chemicals affecting higher functioning may be responsible for schizophrenia. Other possible causes may include imbalances of neurotransmitters in the brain, such as dopamine and glutamate. There have also been physical differences in the structure of schizophrenics' brains observed. For example, ventricles, which are the fluid-filled cavities in the center of the brain, are larger in schizophrenics. They also have less gray matter in their brains, as well as differing levels of activity in certain parts of the brain. Some areas may be more active or less active than an average person. Other causes may include environmental circumstances, such as what kind of home and family a person is raised in and exposed to. Problems before and during birth, including illnesses or malnutrition, may harm the brain and develop schizophrenia, as well as other psychological factors or disorders. Like previously mentioned, schizophrenic symptoms rarely surface before adolescence, when the brain undergoes many developmental changes during puberty.
Corporate coffee futures in professional design future concept to have professional living and function, money to be independent.
There are a few famous people with schizophrenia. The most well-known is Dr. John Nash, a game theory mathematician and winner of the Nobel Prize. His life story is told in the book and movie A Beautiful Mind. Other people include jazz musician Tom Harrell, Australian author Will Elliott, who wrote a best-selling horror book, Peter Green, the guitarist of Fleetwood Mac, Roky Erickson of the 13th Floor Elevators, which is a band, and Dr. Ellen Sachs, who is an expert on law and psychology and a professor at the University of Southern California.
To be independent and wealth generation for entertainment, I have no function for communication and investment. Coffee futures at 23% investment. I have to.
In the media and entertainment, schizophrenia is generally portrayed in a very negative light. Schizophrenics are shown as violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. Horror movie villains are often depicted as having mental illnesses such as schizophrenia. For example, Jason in Friday the 13th and Michael Myers in Halloween. Me, Myself, and Irene gives an erroneous view on schizophrenia. Irene has multiple personalities, which is not a schizophrenic symptom. Donnie Darko most likely has schizophrenia, and the best and most accurate portrayal I've seen is in the movie A Beautiful Mind. This is a list of some books that have characters with schizophrenia. A Beautiful Mind, written by Sylvia Nassar about John Nash, isn't a work of fiction, but it's very prominent work on the topic. As far as treatment of schizophrenia goes, it usually focuses on treating the symptoms instead of the illness itself, since the cause isn't entirely known. The primary form of treatment is antipsychotic medication. There are two types: typical antipsychotics, which have been around since the 1950s, and atypical antipsychotics, which are newer. Chlorazil, an atypical antipsychotic, is the strongest and most effective, but it is used with caution since it can cause other health problems such as lowered immunity.
Shipper effect style, corporate coffee futures and professional design, future concept of professional living and function.
Besides medication, treatment can be administered psychosocially. Through therapy, the patient and family can learn how to manage and cope with the disorder. If there is a substance abuse issue, therapy for schizophrenia can easily be integrated. Some go to rehab or cognitive behavioral therapy, and there are a number of self-help groups available for those that are affected by schizophrenia.
Hello. Hello. Why are you ignoring me?
There have been numerous studies conducted on schizophrenia. Some of the more recent ones have been conducted by the International Schizophrenia Consortium, or ISC. In 2009, they isolated chromosomal differences at 22 and 6p, which are chromosomal locations. The same year, several other research groups found 6p to be different in schizophrenics. A year prior, in 2008, ISC collaborated with some Icelandic researchers and found missing parts on chromosomes 1 and 15. These findings help support the theory that schizophrenia may be genetic in origin. Harvard has made a lot of progress in schizophrenia research. In 1976, the CT scanner was invented, and Harvard researchers found evidence of the large ventricles previously mentioned. Then in 1984, they conducted the first MRI study on schizophrenia. The New England Journal of Medicine was the first to study large slices of schizophrenic brains in 1992, discovering low gray matter content. That's all I have for now. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of these simulated auditory hallucinations created by an Australian researcher.
You're bad.
Hello. You're disgusting. You're filthy.
You're bad.
You bastard.
You're clean. There's never told. They'll lock you away. You'll stick their hands in you. They'll
Point.
they'll kill you.
Worthless.
Stupid.
So stupid. Look at you. Stupid. Stupid. Pointless.
Hello.
Worthless.
Never talk to them.
Stupid.
But you touched that, wouldn't you?
Wishes. So
You touched them,
your
and they know.
wishes.
They look at you. I can see you sweating.
Wishes.
They're looking at that. She knows. She knows.